We're ready to begin our regular school board meeting for January 19th, 2021. All 7 trustees present. Let us begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. I did not have anyone sign up for public forum. So we're going to begin with the superintendent's report, and then we're going to move into executive session. Since we have our legal counsel present, we're going to get that part of the meeting taken care of right after the superintendent's report.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. Yes, I'm going to keep my comments very brief. I'm going to turn it over in just a second to Mr. Wozniak, who has a couple of slides that talk about where we're at and where we're heading. And Coach Walsh is also on this in case anybody has any questions about athletics. But my comments simply are to take a minute to thank you all as board members for the work that you do to support us. I know that you get paid a lot of money to do this job, and it often goes unnoticed, but as some of you have pointed out, the biggest impacts in governance and policy making are really happen at the local level and can make a difference for students in this case. So as superintendent, I wanted to thank you on behalf of cabinet for all the work that you have done to support us, and especially during this pandemic, as you have bared with us as we tried to figure this out. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Wozniak, who's going to try and answer some of the questions that were asked at the agenda prep.
Good evening, President Cantu, Mr. Cardona, members of the board. Doug Wozniak, Director of School Safety. We go ahead to that next slide, Andrew. So this is our PPE distribution and inventory, and this is pretty much a summary of what we've done from the very beginning. So I'll give you just a minute to kind of digest that, and then I'll answer any questions you might have. Does anyone have any questions on this chart?
I did. I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just wondering where the materials that we received, I think from the city, are reflected on this chart.
It's going to be basically in the disposable mass adults. Because we're so flexible in getting those kind of donations and stuff, I just kind of put it as our starting inventory because it was kind of close to the beginning of the year, but that's going to be reflected in the disposable mass. And then you can see that we've given out approximately 35,000 in those 4 deliveries.
Okay, and so then do we have adequate supplies for the remainder of the school year?
Yes, ma'am. If you look at that, the remaining, what we've got planned, January, February, March, April, we're looking really good. Of course, you know, there's still some purchases here and there along the way, whatever a campus might need. But as far as the big things, especially the hand sanitizer, we're looking really stout as far as inventory.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Anyone else before we go to the next slide? All right, Andrew, can you move to the next slide? So this is kind of just a really quick overview of what we've done. If you remember, we started and it's called Binex testing, which is, again, our in-house nurse testing. and that would have started that week after Thanksgiving, so that first week of December. So far, 658 tests, and this is going to go through like last Friday. In-house positive student tests 18, and then positive adult tests 39. So as you can tell by this chart, quite a bit of tests given. Not an overwhelming amount of positives by any means, but I think the side effect and the story behind the story here is not only do we have the opportunity to make our schools safer with this testing, but if you look at those numbers real carefully, you'll see that about 600 students and staff members were allowed the opportunity to get back to class. Whereas before we did this testing, if you remember, even a symptom so much as a headache, if it's on our list, you're going to get sent home until you come back under certain conditions. So this is a real celebration of 600 people getting back to learning quicker than they would have without our nurses doing this kind of work. And then I added at the bottom there, we have been in multiple talks with the county. We actually met with them on Friday to devise our vaccination schedule. And basically we're waiting on that go from the county. And as soon as we get that word, we're basically looking at 72 hours from delivery for the confirmation. And then what we're thinking is it's probably going to be a 2 or 3 day event from about 12 to 7 at the PAC Center. And so far we've got about 800 adults that we're looking at getting vaccinated from the district. Any questions at all?
I had some questions.
Yes.
So this is terrific, but I just wanted to make sure that I understand correctly that this testing that's reflected here does not include the testing that we have been doing with athletes since August, correct?
Correct. Yeah, that would be a different chart, I guess, that Coach Walsh would have.
Okay, and my understanding is, I believe, because I've got notification from my own students' coaches last week, that we are continuing that testing for athletes through the spring sports, correct?
That was my understanding, but let me get with Coach Walsh to make sure on that.
Okay. But then I do have a question about this positivity rate here, because I saw last week in the media that Austin ISD was reporting a really high positivity rate for its students.
Right.
And that was confusing for me because I understood that many of their students were also remote, like ours, as many
Right.
of ours continue to be. And I don't understand how they're getting that positivity rate. Is that just the number of students that they're testing on their own campuses through programs like this, or is that a number that they're getting from their county data? Because I've had my students tested a number of times and I've never been asked what school district they attend.
Right.
I've had them tested on campus and off campus. So I'm confused about those numbers.
And I don't know for sure if Austin is doing in-house testing, so I can't, be sure on that. And to be honest with you, I think you're right. Any of our kids that go to like a curative, I don't think that those results are going to the health department as far as the positivity rate. So I don't know. The interesting thing about this, though, as far as the positivity rate, is you have to understand that most of the time we're testing symptomatic people. Because if you remember when we started this, we only had 1,700 delivered, and we're still on a very tight schedule as far as inventory. So we don't just test everybody. So this has been majority symptomatic. So that's an interesting thing, right? Because you don't have the sample of an asymptomatic and a symptomatic where you have a true, positivity rate. So this is a little skewed, but it's actually a lot better than I would have anticipated before we started this.
Yeah, I think that everybody's doing a great job at mitigating transmissions, and I'm really impressed by that. Which goes to my last question, which is, I know that the CDC guidelines have continued to evolve in terms of guidelines for contact tracing and what constitutes prolonged exposure, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
And I know that we're continuing to notify, campuses when there's contact tracers are following up if people have been in close contact and need to take further measures. But can you give me an idea of sort of what that looks like now on our campuses in terms of what constitutes prolonged exposure? I know, my student athlete was exposed and quarantined subsequently, but in a classroom, where we have a teacher would be in a classroom, for more than 15 minutes, certainly, even if the students are distanced and wearing masks. How are we handling that?
Yeah, so a lot of it still stems around that definition that we started with, because remember that CDC has guidelines that then push down to TEA. And so we're really focused a little bit more on TEA than I would say that we are in CDC. So TEA always listens to CDC and then they pass down guidelines, right? So our definition is still roughly the same, which is about 15 to 20 minutes of cumulative, which is right all day. And then you can take into account masks and dividers. A lot of times what we're looking for is when we get that alert right away in a text, we begin that process by getting the contact tracing team involved from that campus. And a lot of that, as you know, is just a lot of interviews. So once you get the student's story about where they've been on campus, then you double check with the adult to see whether that matches up with what they've kind of heard. What we found is, I wish I had statistics on it, but that's really hard, right, when you're contact tracing. But we really haven't had any prevalent spread among students like we have. It's more about staff members right now. And I know we're remote, so that makes a big difference. But for the most part, the students are doing what they're supposed to be doing, even to the point of, at recess with wearing their masks and at PE wearing their masks. So we don't see that spread. So what we're looking for, to be honest with you, is the areas like lunch, recess, and like specials. So those are the ones that we kind of go after right away, right? Because we're looking for, was a mistake made at lunchtime? Because obviously you got to eat without your mask. So what does the spacing look like, and do they have seating charts? That's a big one. And then recess, are the masks on or off? And did they take, especially with like little ones, they're taking the masks off, they're hugging on each other, right? That's not an uncommon thing to see. So we're looking for those kind of, and I don't want to say mistakes, right? But according to our definition, yes, there was a mistake made as far as a mask being dropped. We've had close contacts with that. Special ed rooms, where we might have some kiddos that have a hard time keeping them on just physically. And so we're looking for those kind of mistakes being made. And then we institute the 14-day. I remember CDC changed their guidelines, but we have not. CDC has allowed, and TA has allowed, a 7 and a 10-day if you're exposed type of thing. And we're going strictly by our local health department, and they've recommended 14. So we continue with our students to do 14 anytime we think there's a close contact.
And I guess my concern is if we have, you're very familiar with elementary school classrooms and pre-K, kindergarten, first graders. And if a teacher is, asymptomatic, but then discovers that they've been positive and have been in that classroom for several days, and even if, everybody's got double desking and the masks are being worn, it's the CDC guidelines that I read suggest, that even then that the cloth mask may not be preventing if somebody's been in a classroom
right
for 6+ hours for several days, right? So then I'm concerned about how we're treating those scenarios. Well,
and like I said, CDC says that, but then TEA says opposite, where we can look at that kind of stuff. So all I can say is that when we look at our history, we don't see that that concern of the teacher infecting the rest of the class come true yet. Now, I don't want to, knock on wood, but we just haven't seen an outbreak due to, it might be one student in one class, but we haven't seen that. If an adult pops a positive, we don't necessarily see any kind of record of a spread at all, to be honest with you. So okay. We're just continuing to kind of do what's worked so far, but at the same time, and keep in mind, Ms. Halsey, that if we do have those instances where we have an exposure, but may not be a quarantine, that's what we want to use that testing for too. So although we say that we only test symptomatic, right? We know that there's a lot of extenuating circumstances and things that we can do to try to help that teacher. So there's a, it's not just about symptomatics. We see a little bit more this week, since we have mostly adults on campus, of adults getting tested that might be asymptomatic. Nobody ever said that we couldn't. It was just our plan to say, hey, we've got an inventory, we got a control here. But definitely, if it's a borderline exposure, and there's a call for a test, we're going to test that teacher, even if we have to do it in the parking lot.
So, and that was actually just reminding me that I looked earlier today at our dashboard for this week's numbers, and I haven't seen them posted yet. Do you think that those will be up tomorrow?
I know that Mr. Fernandez had texted me in the middle of the day to compare my numbers to his. So if he hasn't already posted them at this time, it will probably be done by tonight, I imagine.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate everything.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Is that the end of your report?
Oh, I have a question.
Ms. Hanson?
Yes, I noted 800 adults vaccines. Is that what you're predicting that we'll get from the health department, or
that's pretty much what has been told to us right now as a yes from that employee. Now we know that we won't turn anybody away, but from a health department standpoint, right, they needed numbers so that we don't have the worst thing that can happen is we tell them 800, right, and then 1,200 employees show up and they didn't bring enough vaccines. So that was a more preliminary, not a sign up, but we need to know numbers now so that we can start to prepare for this thing.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Arredondo? Mr. Arredondo?
Thank you, Ms. Cantu. Yeah, sorry, I was unmuting myself. Mr. Fernandez, if you could go back to the first slide of Mr. Wozniak's presentation. I had a question about the number of masks that we have in the ISD. I'm trying to understand that chart a little bit better. But it was my understanding that the city of San Marcos donated 192,000 masks to the school district. And that chart, at least based on what I read and what I comprehended, did not reflect that. Because that seems like a pretty substantial number when it says we have like 52,000 adult masks. So does that mean the ISD didn't buy any, or?
We have not bought any disposable masks really since all those donations came in. But I can definitely recheck that inventory. I didn't think the number was that high, but it was a significant number.
Okay, well, that was what was put out by our district's PR team in the city. Okay. It was 192,000. So again, just trying to understand and comprehend that. The other thing, and for future board meetings when we have these COVID updates, if we could have all of the ISD testing data, if the athletics department is doing another, universe of testing and positivity rates with those students, I would like to have that information readily available. It can just be, desegregated as, this is what the campuses are doing, and this is what our athletic department is doing, but just as a request for information moving forward. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Mejia?
Hi. So I agree with Mr. Arredondo. I would like to also see that testing report, and I would like to see it like maybe by month. And then also like on the vaccinations, I know that you're estimating around 800, but are those going to be done like by priority groupings?
The priority grouping for us is just 1B staff. That's okay. Basically how it's broken down.
Okay.
Anyone else? Mr. McLaughlin?
Thanks, Clem. So, Mr. Wozniak, have we been able to point any staff who fall into existing vaccine distribution troughs to private providers to be vaccinated before the school district may get a direct supply?
We've taken care of the nurses already, and what we've had all of our teams on each campus spread the message of is, if you have an opportunity to get in somewhere into a private doctor's office, please by all means go. Don't wait for us to mass. So yes, I have reports of people going to Seguin, to the HEB there, into some of the surrounding areas. We've even been told to guide people towards Austin Health Department. I guess they've got the first big giant shipment. And so I know, like right now, Family Health, San Marcos Family Health is kind of taking, they tell you how many they have, and they're taking requests for individuals right now.
And is there a means of us extending the dashboard reported data to include vaccines administered so that we can watch that number move up and realize that we're moving out of a employee at least risk?
If Mr. Fernandez is open to that, and Mr. Cardona doesn't have any objections, it's an easy number to get as far as I'm concerned.
I just don't know if they're reporting that data to you, like, I took a dose A, dose B on these dates. I don't know if there's a reporting mechanism for you to have.
Right. Yes, I can't say for sure that I'll know about the people that have gone individually and whether we even have the right to ask for that, I guess, until it becomes an HR thing. But definitely the mass one that we're doing, we have a sign-up sheet, we have a check-in, we've got a whole elaborate thing that we're going to have to do. So we'll definitely have numbers on that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
Mr. Redondo, you had another question?
Yes, Ms. Cantu, thank you. Just going off of what Trustee McLaughlin said, I appreciate that the ISD is, following up and encouraging employees, if they can go through their primary care physician, to start opting into the vaccination process. If there was a way for us to track that separate as well, I guess, just to, elaborate on what Mr. McLaughlin's comment was, I'd be interested to see how many ISD employees we can encourage to go through private healthcare providers that, are serviced through the ISD's insurance program. And secondly, and I'm sure Mr. Wozniak is in constant communication with the health department, but I think, Ms. Cantu can speak to the in-depth questionnaires that are being asked by, Austin Public Health and some of these other public vaccination hubs. And I'm hoping that, the ISD, whether it's human resources or, Mr. Wozniak's office, if we can create some type of, readily accessible database of contact information for ISD employees who are Group 1A or Group 1B, because I'm assuming that whatever entity has the infrastructure to facilitate the quickest, vaccination distribution is going to have, in my opinion, preference with the health department, right? If the ISD says, we have 300 ISD employees, their contact information, they're identified as Group 1A or 1B, we want them to be vaccinated by the county health department. I would think that would get them, expedited through that process from what I've seen what Austin other entities have done. So if there's a way that, y'all can do that, or if you're already doing that, thank you. But again, just talking with folks is having that data and information for those populations accessible is what's getting people, expedited through the vaccination process.
Yes, sir. I'll work with Dr. Byte.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Mr. Wozniak, is that it?
That's it. Thank you all.
Okay. Mr. Cardona, we're going to go ahead and move into closed session as authorized by Section 551.071 of the Texas Government Code. Consultation with legal counsel. Discussion with legal counsel regarding proposed memorandum of understanding between San Marcos Consolidated Independent School District and Centro Cultural Hispano de San Marcos and matters incident thereto. So if we could clear the deck to keep only those people that are authorized to be in executive session.
Yes, ma'am. So if everyone besides the board members can sign off and then log back in, so you'll go into the waiting room, and then we'll let you back in when the board is done with closed session.
At 7:21 from executive session, and we will begin with our reports and informational items. Academic update first. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear
This will
you.
be Nicole Dre. will be presenting tonight's academic update.
Okay. All right, we ready?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right, thank you. Good evening, Board of Trustees and Superintendent Cardona. I'm pleased to introduce tonight's update on our instructional redesign at Travis and Mendez. One of the key points in tonight's update is a shift from a school-wide approach to the extended school year to an opt-in model, and you'll hear the rationale for that in just a moment. Tonight, Blaine Carpenter, our coordinator of school redesign for extended school year, and principal of Travis, Scott Massini, and principal of Mendez, Christina Woody, will be presenting tonight's update. And this update will also be framing our action item for later tonight. Okay.
Good evening, everybody. So our purpose at the Office of Innovation is to make school better for students, families, and teachers through stakeholder-driven design. So our most important job is really to listen, so that when we bring change, that we're doing it with stakeholders and not to them. Excellent. So the purpose of this extended calendar opportunity, we were really excited about this at Travis and Mendez, because with the extra time in the school year, we could provide more enrichment activities like STEAM, SEL, and even cooking classes to our students to benefit whole child development. And research shows that with more time in school, there's reduced learning loss over the summer. And so just for some context, this is our calendar for redesigning the calendar at Travis and Mendez. So we started doing parent and teacher outreach back in early October. And in January, we submitted a draft of our plan to TEA for feedback. They provided some really encouraging feedback for us and conditionally approved the plan on January 6th. That approval is contingent on board approval tonight. And then after tonight, if our plan is approved, we'll continue fleshing out the plan. We'll do more outreach and design, come back to the board in February for an update, and again in March for a vote on the final details of the plan. And that final plan is due to TEA on April 1st. So I mentioned stakeholder-driven design. Here's a look at all the ways that we reached out. So we engage with stakeholders face-to-face through our community learning exchanges. We've done Zoom and Facebook Live sessions. We've conducted interviews and sent out flyers. Normally, we would have liked to do more face-to-face and large gatherings to get the word out, but that wasn't possible this year due to COVID. But we did receive praise from TEA on all of our outreach for giving stakeholders input into the planning process. So next, I'm going to pass it to Ms. Woody to talk about what the stakeholders had to say.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to see you, and thank you for providing this space for us to get to talk to you about this great opportunity we see for our kids. I'll start by talking about the extended calendar and the details. We were able to participate in community learning exchanges, as Mr. Carpenter stated, with our staff and our parents to create the calendar. So we also brought in feedback from surveys and dialogues from any of our parents or students or staff that were unable to attend. And with that, we developed a calendar together. So we'll start early August and end late June, which provides a break the whole month of July. We really heard from everyone, our staff and our parents, that they'd like to keep all the holidays the same. So having that same Thanksgiving break, spring break staying the same so that everyone can have that time with their family. So we did incorporate that into the calendar. We'll have a half day of enrichment for our students every week. And this will include kind of what Blaine was talking about with the interest-based instruction, STEM, fine arts, clubs, sports, baking, gardening, all of those things that we know are great for kids. We would really like to have community members come into the school during that time and, COVID permitting, be able to take our kids on field trips. And while students are participating in that enrichment, teachers will be participating in additional planning time. Something we really heard from teachers about creating a space for them not to be burned out with those additional 30 days was having that planning time. And so we're giving them the planning time for that, and also that intentional time to improve our classroom core instruction. So we're excited about that. So yes, we sent a survey out to our parents along with a short video asking for their input regarding an extra 30 days. And so here you can see the results from both of our campuses. We've also participated in small group dialogues with parents, which we truly believe is actually the best way to get real feedback and qualitative data. But with COVID, that's been a little difficult. So we're continuing to have those conversations. I know I actually had some parents who voted no on the survey, but this week, after being able to have dialogues with them and seeing what this will look like day to day, they've actually decided that they do want to opt in. So I know Mr. Massini and I are continuing to have those dialogues with our parents to give them the clarification or answers that they need to make sure they're making the best decision for their students. So it's an ongoing process. We surveyed all of our staff members, so that's teachers, our teacher leaders, our non-instructional staff, our hourly employees. So every department that's inside of our school answered this survey. So you can see both of our results below. I know that Mr. Massini and I are continuing to have conversations about this with our staff. So every time I meet with them or check in with individuals, I'm always asking where they are in this process, how we can help support them as we transition to this calendar.
Good evening, President Cantu, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Cardona. This brings us to tonight. So after the vote, we will continue to have outreach and program design. As Dr. Carpenter said, our goal in this redesign process is to support increases in teacher planning, provide more enrichment for our scholars, and enhance the professional development. So we will also, after that, we will be looking to inform the board and have more opportunities to engage staff and the community, with our final plan being due on April 1st. So again, tonight, we're looking for an approval of that preliminary academic redesign plan, including the 210 instructional days calendar for both Mendez and Travis, for staff and families who opt in. Next slide, please. And we're looking at responding to the feedback of our stakeholders. That offer of doing a cohort model of both Travis and Mendez will help us provide choice for families in the neighborhood, and keep families at their neighborhood school. And it will also help us prevent staff turnover. So we will also be, throughout this process, we'll be looking to assess, we will iterate, if we do this right, we're going to expand the extended calendar cohort for 21-22, or I should say after the 21-22 school year.
Thank you so much. That concludes our presentation. We know you've heard these details from us for the last several board meetings, but tonight, with the exception of shifting to that opt-in model. So we're very excited to be able to share that with you, and just reiterate that our stakeholder-driven redesign we're working very hard to be responsive to our stakeholders. So thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Clem. Yes, Ms. Diapando.
I will open up with a motion, and then we can, if someone has more discussion. But I would like to move that we approve the preliminary academic redesign plan.
Okay, that motion would be under our items for action. Do you want to wait to do that motion then and continue?
Okay, well, I just had it ready.
You have it ready? Well, I'll be sure and call on you.
Okay.
We can continue with the construction update.
Okay, good evening. Board President Cantu, Board of Trustees, Superintendent Cardona. I'll be delivering the January construction update. We're going to start by looking at the budget. Last month, as y'all recall, we closed out the 5 campus renovation project. That coupled with an in-depth audit that we performed on that project, we're able to realize an additional $900,000 in estimated savings versus last month. As we discussed last month as well, we're identifying opportunities throughout the district, creating a menu of options for consideration. But first, we think it's important that we need to get further along with the DeZavala project and the Miller Middle School project before we start looking at other opportunities. There'll be some, but like I said, we want to get further along in these projects. And second, I think it's important that we also bring legal counsel in front of the board so that y'all can understand what all we can do with those excess funds. So we'll continue to have discussions as we move forward. If we can go to the next slide, I'll talk about the Miller Middle School project. So you want to go to the next slide. 2 areas of focus for me, obviously, is the budget and the schedule. And I also obviously look at the quality. I look at keeping the campuses clean. I also try to minimize disruption to the students and staff at both of the campuses. But I do spend a lot of time on the schedule. Both Weber and Bartlett, both of the contractors on each of our projects, each month submit a pay application to us along with an updated schedule. We also review schedules weekly at our OAC meetings, but the monthly schedule I really take a deep dive into. And as you can see in the highlighted areas for the Miller Middle School campus or the Miller Middle School project, we have some concerns, especially if you look right there to the 3rd bullet point on phase 3. Now that's going into the start of school for next year. So part of the agreement that we have with the contractors, if at any time the schedule falls further than 2 weeks out, we do require a schedule of recovery, and that is what we've requested from Weber, and we're in the process of putting that together, and we'll review it. The other phases, phase 1, it's about a week out right now over the scheduled delivery date, and then phase 3B is about 2 weeks out. But really, like I said, the phase 3A is what is concerning, because I don't want to get into a situation where we're inconveniencing the students and staff as we might have had to, and we've had to this past school year. So we can go to the next slide, Andrew. As far as activity, there's still a lot of progress. I'm not going to go into depth. I can tell you there's a big push right now to get the exterior walls closed up so we can start a lot of activity that happens inside. Once we're able to close those walls up, there's a lot of progress being made on the inside of the school. A couple of pictures I'll share with you. The picture on the left, it's not the best picture, but it was the only picture I could grab at that time. That's just showing that the brick has started. It's probably haven't been out there since last Thursday, but it's probably progressed further, and that is on the south side. It's going to wrap around to the through the band hall to the front of the building, like I said, down to the south side. And then the picture on the right is the hallway looking from the in the ensemble and choir area. The rooms on the right are practice rooms, and then if you go to the next slide, you'll see the actual rooms of the ensemble and choir. These are huge, spacious rooms, a lot of room for the students. And then the last 2 photos, if you go to the next slide, Andrew, is Just another shot of the inside. As you can see the photo on the right, there's a lot of framing that has gone up. So they're in the process of putting electrical and plumbing. Once that's done, they can start sheetrocking. And but before they do that, they need to close up those exterior walls. Looking at DeZavala, a couple of notes on the schedule, and you've heard me talk about this before in previous presentations, and that's the difference between remodeling and new construction. And as you can see, phase 3 again here at DeZavala, particularly it's the old admin area, and it'll be now the new library, art room, GT, and science labs. As Bartlett went to go demo that area and the ceiling area in the old admin, we uncovered 2 HVAC units, which is your AC units, along with chiller pipes. And as we all know, libraries being the focal point of our campuses, this area called for a 13-foot ceilings, but obviously with those units in the way, we weren't going to be able to accomplish that. And I'll share some pictures of this here briefly, but we did ask Bartlett to relocate those. We think it's important that we have that open, spacious libraries, the focal point of the campuses. So we're able to accomplish that, but it's going to push the completion date from April 30th to the end of school, which is May 30th. Aside from moving those, there's a lot that goes on with electrical piping in order to make sure that those units are operating. One positive note on phase 3B, as you can see there, the gym lights, the LED lighting in the gym, and I do have a picture of that, has been completed. So once again, trying to work ahead. If you go to the next slide, just some items. Like I said, we installed the new lights. We were able to demo the old admin area. We did some asbestos abatement in the old custodial office, which is an opportunity to work ahead. And then some items for the next 30 days. We're finishing up the vinyl graphing on the front entry, switching to a new alarm system, and then finishing some plumbing in the new library. As far as pictures are concerned, and the picture on the left shows the 2 units. If you look at that man lift right there next to that pole, that unit right above, and then there's one that the two black circles, those are the 2 units that had to be relocated. And the pictures on the right are showing you where we did relocate those. And once again, like I said, there's still a lot of piping and electrical that needs to happen to make sure that those things are functional. The next set of pictures, and I have to apologize, the only way for me to get the total picture here was either stand on a mountain of rubble or stand on top of a container, and I didn't want to do both, but I was able to show you, if you're looking at the campus, that was the old admin building, and you can see the canopies on both on the left, right-hand photo. Those will eventually be covered, and there will be additional space for the science and GT area, art area. The drawing on the left shows what the finished product is going to look like. And then the yellow area is the outdoor learning areas, which, if you look up to DeZavala from the road, it's a pretty nice view. You look up the hill. So that outdoor area on the left is going to will look really nice. Will be a really nice area for students to learn. And then the last photos I have is just the photo of the new lights in the gym. And I wish I would have had a photo of the old lights, but there was quite a few more lights on the old lights, and obviously with LED lighting, we don't need as much. And then we had to replace some pumps in the mechanical room. So with that, that's all I have this evening. If there's any questions, I'll certainly answer those now.
Anyone? Thank you for your report, Mr. Sandoval. We can move on to our quarterly investment report.
Thank you, Board President Cantu. I'll direct you to your board book on page 18 for the quarterly investment report. And I don't expect there to be you to notice any surprises, but I will tell you that we've watched this very closely the last few months. It appears that Hays County had a challenge in getting the billing out on time. And so in November, when we expected to see our collections really start to come in, they really didn't. We started to see it really pick up in December, and now we're going strong. You can see we ended the quarter just a little bit down from where we started it, but we're watching our collections closely, both in the general fund and in the INS on page 19. If you continue to the quarterly investment report, you can see that our revenue, and this is on page 24, our revenue to date by the end of December is about 36%. And then farther down on that far right-hand column, our expenditures are in direct alignment to that. Right now, we're at 36%. And so that gives you a good idea of where we stand. Again, we're watching our revenues really closely because we know our community is just struggling right now, and we're not quite sure what to expect. But also our timelines are off. It's hard to project based on the last several years of when we receive money and how much, because our billing cycles were off a little bit because of Hayes. So we continue to watch that really closely, and we're cautiously optimistic right now that we're right back on track.
Any questions from any trustees? Let's continue. You finished the investment, the financial?
I had those together, ma'am.
No questions on the financial report? Okay, let's continue then. We'll move into the agenda items that we're going to consent with.
President Cantu, I'll move that we approve the consent agenda items.
I second.
All in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What am I missing?
It's possible I'm frozen on your screen. I am on my own, but you seem to be able to hear me.
Yes.
It's 7-0. I've got all 7.
Opposed, 0. Let's move on to the 2 at-large positions on the board for a term of 3 years and any matters incident thereto.
For President Cantu, it is time to start the elections process again for our election in May. The election will be held on May 1st, and it is for our 2 at-large positions. The deadline for approving this is actually a day before our February board meeting. So we are bringing you this item, but we'll have to update you in February with the polling locations as that information becomes available. Some of that is just still not developed. Hayes has sent us an initial list. Guadalupe is still working on it. It's tough to get poll workers right now nailed down.
Mr. Barton, have you gotten any indication from Hayes County or the elections administrator with regard to their willingness to conduct this election? Because when we did this a year ago, we had, we approved everything, and then they ended up not being willing to go forward, and we moved things to November, and it was in a similar viral context. So have you had a conversation with the elections administrator?
Yes, sir. We are good to go. Hayes is actually going to be supporting Caldwell and running their election also. Caldwell's having some changes and transitions in their elections office. And so Hayes has been very gracious to make that all work. Guadalupe will be running their election.
Thanks.
I move that we approve the an order election to be held May 1st, 2021.
I'll second.
Oh, Mr. Arredondo seconds. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposed, 0. Consider approval of the 2021 to 2022 academic calendar.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. Superintendent Cardona. So as we do every year, the DEIC and the calendar committee created 2 calendar options for next school year. We sent that out for a vote to our community and staff. And so the final results were, we had 1,717 responses. Option 1 had 1,226 votes, and option 2 had 491 votes. So option 1 was the winner by a good amount, and that would be our recommendation for the academic calendar for next school year.
So that's starting earlier and finishing up earlier, right?
So the first day of school would be the same on either calendar. Really, it's just for the staff. The staff come back sooner, and then their summer break would begin sooner as well.
Right. And the one that was selected had the Indigenous Peoples Day.
Okay, both did.
Yes, both calendars had that option.
There was something that was different on the notes. I was looking at them.
It had an extra day off for Easter, or for April, sorry. We call it April.
They probably got a Monday off.
Yeah.
Yes, district holiday on April the 18th.
Yes, they chose to have the Easter Friday and the Monday, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So, any questions or discussion?
No, I move that we approve option 1 calendar.
I'll second that. All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Any opposed? 0. Ms. Villapando, did you want to make a motion on this next one?
Yes, I want to make a motion. I want to move to approve the preliminary school academic redesign plans for Mendez and Travis Elementary Schools.
I second.
Who seconded?
Me.
Ms. Hanson seconds. Any questions or discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You didn't vote? 6. Mr. McLaughlin opposed.
I'm still against this every time. And I think this time it showed the parents weren't really supportive. So I continue to have concerns that we're rolling this out and dragging people along. And that worries me.
Okay. So passes 6-1.
So just to clear up any misunderstandings, because I think there might have been. So this is an opt-in calendar. So this will allow them to continue work. So let's say 20 parents in first grade at Travis want to opt in and the rest don't, then they will start planning based on one classroom as an additional calendar. So it's not an entire all campus, kind of like our multi-age with Bowie kind of was originally a full scale. And then after we went through a planning year, it really became like a pilot cohort and kind of like dual language. So it's just I understand you, I hear your concerns, but I think it's not an all or nothing. And I think
thank you, Mr. Superintendent. I do appreciate that adjustment. Yes, sir.
Item D, consider approval of City of San Marcos sidewalk easement at Rodriguez Elementary. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Ms. Villapando.
Yeah, I have questions.
Before we vote, I have questions, yeah.
Okay, Mr. Arredondo makes the motion and Ms. Villapando seconds. Questions and discussion?
Yeah, President Cantu, I don't know who's speaking to this item, but so these sidewalks are already poured from what I understand. I don't see any justification for providing the afterwards easement and giving away a portion of our property, at least from an exclusive access standpoint. So can someone speak to that? What's the upside of doing this?
I'll speak to that, Mr. McLaughlin. This is Bernie Sandoval. So Trace, the development company, came to us, I guess, last year during this time, or right around this time. And for some reason, this easement request never got followed through. So, but what they did is they went from a 6-inch sidewalk or 6-foot sidewalk up to a 12-foot sidewalk. It's to the point where anybody that's coming from the south side of the neighborhood is going to be able to walk on that sidewalk all the way to the school. So they were looking after the best interest, obviously, of students and families. The second piece of that is they asked for another 2 feet along William Moon, which is one of the roads that runs through there. to get away from because they've got a lot of trees planted, and in order to get away from the sidewalk to allow these trees to grow and not have damage to sidewalks in the future, they asked for this extra 2 feet of space.
I appreciate that, but normally you grant a sidewalk easement to a municipality or a city before the work in the sidewalks board, and they usually make that a condition of doing the work. And it seems like here everything's already been done. It's been done great from what I understand and from what I can view when I've been over to the area, and I just don't understand the rationale for an easement now.
Well, I think it's more of a documentation, because according to Trace, they have proposed this to the district in the past, and for whatever reason we didn't address it then.
Okay. And has your contact been Trace? I understand the easement is for public area, so presumably to the city of San Marcos. Does the city of San Marcos have maintenance responsibilities?
I do not know. I know
Okay.
when we'll file it. I'll find an answer and get it back to y'all.
If it's an easement.
Ms. Cantu.
Yes. Mr.
Yeah, so I guess as of right now, whose obligation is it to maintain the sidewalk if this easement isn't granted? Or does that change who's obligated to maintain the sidewalk, or whose responsibility the sidewalk is in perpetuity?
I think it's going to be the district's responsibility to maintain the sidewalk. Regarding
granting them the easement?
Right.
That doesn't make much sense.
Well, like I said, I need to verify that. I don't know the answer to that, but I would think if it's similar to even a residential or commercial property, if it's in your property, and although the city has easement rights to it, you still have to maintain it as the property owner. But like I said, if we want to wait on this, I can certainly follow up with the group.
That'd be my preference.
Yeah, I'll agree with Kathy on that. I appreciate, Mr. Sandoval and staff doing their due diligence on our end, but I guess, again, it's a little bit confusing right now. The rationale behind it, and if they already poured it, but we're going to be obligated to maintain it. I think there's a lot of other obligations for our facilities and maintenance staff versus, a 12-foot sidewalk that was originally intended to be 6 feet that somebody, not the ISD, changed that specification on, right? So, it seems like they were able to do that without our permission to begin with, and now we're giving them an even larger easement because of that. So
do we want to table this until we have more information?
I think so.
I think so.
I think procedurally you had a motion and a second. So do we need the movement to withdraw?
Yes, I need a motion to withdraw the motion.
I'll just withdraw my motion.
Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to vote on it.
And Ms. Villapanto, you withdrew your second?
Yes.
Okay, so then we can just proceed. We can have a motion to table this until next month.
We don't have a motion to approve it, then it's tabled.
Yeah, I think you have the discretion, President Cantu. If you want a motion, I'll make it, but I think you can just do that under your authority.
Okay, well then let's move on to the next one. E, discussion and possible approval of resolution regarding extension of emergency paid sick leave for district employees.
Ms. Cantu, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion that we approve this resolution as presented by the administration.
Second.
Mr. Arredondo makes the motion and Mr. McLaughlin seconds. Any questions or discussion?
I have a quick question. It's just regarding, conversations that I've had with ISD staff to better understand the process in which they go about COVID leave, I guess, for instance. Could someone explain to me how that would work if this resolution is passed? What that, I guess, chain of events would entail for them to, had a positive diagnosis or a, exposure notification, what does that time frame or timeline look like inside the organization?
Mr. Arredondo, this is Stephanie Munoz, Executive Director of HR. So right now what our process has been is staff members will contact Human Resources and their supervisor to let them know of a positive test result or exposure. And then our HR office sends over documentation which the federal government issued. We have them fill out a form and then provide us the supporting documentation. We coordinate with our payroll team and let them know that those days should be covered under emergency paid sick leave. So we'll continue that process. We've actually been documenting on our own right now to be able to assist with the staff members who are currently out. Should this resolution pass, we want to work with staff to ensure that they do get that credit on their sick leave balance.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ms. Munoz. My next question was going to be would this be retroactive for any employees who have had a positive diagnosis since December 31st? My third question is, when we talk about documentation, is it a positive COVID test through the ISD in Hays County, through any medical provider? What necessary documentation is asked for from employees if they say, I have, tested positive or I've been exposed, and now I need to quarantine for X number of days?
Either a physician's note documenting that they're positive and what the quarantine will look like, or the test results. Most of our staff are getting tested on campus or at transportation. If not, they are going to Curative and they're sending over that information, or their own healthcare provider. So we'll take any documentation and then we do ask for a release before returning to work, just to ensure all safety of staff and students.
Wonderful, thank you.
I have a slightly different question. President Cantu?
Go ahead, Mr. McLaughlin.
It's not purely an HR question, but just it's probably more of a curriculum and instruction question, but do we have numbers on how many Zoom virtual classes have been canceled by the instructor on account of illness or for other reasons?
We would need to get that information from HR to see how many we've had to cancel. But to my knowledge, no, what's happening is another teacher within that content area is also supporting the class if a teacher is not available through our campus.
Is that something central administration monitors down through the campus level? Like if a message goes out that says no Zoom today for third period or what have you, is your office copied on that in order to know how prevalent that is?
No, sir.
Okay, thanks.
And Mr. McLaughlin, from our HR standpoint, we are coordinating with the campus leader to let them know that this staff member is unable to perform remote work, or they can continue to work remotely if they're quarantined and feel capable of working. So we do keep the campus leader informed so they can make adjustments on the campus level if needed.
Thanks for the information.
Ms. Cantu, I have one final question, I guess, based on Ms. Munoz's response. Ms. Munoz, if you'll just clarify, is there an option, because that's what I've also heard from, I guess, some staff, is that, they've wanted to continue working, although they've, been exposed to COVID-19, but, have to quarantine for that reason, but they themselves are not sick. So is that an option for staff, is if they're in quarantine that they can continue fulfilling their, obligations as an ISD employee?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We do ask the staff member if they're able to work remotely, and if their campus leader adjust work for them to continue. And if possible, and they're feeling up to it and well, they can continue working remotely.
Wonderful, thank you.
Ms. Halsey?
Thanks. Ms. Munoz, I had a question about substitute teachers, and my impression is that we have a shortage of subs, and so how are we handling the coverage of classrooms when a teacher has to be quarantined and is unable to be at work?
Yes, across the state, speaking with our colleagues, there is definitely a decrease in sub availability. Many of our subs are retired teachers, but we are working with different campus staff to cover, whether we have campus specialists who don't have a classroom and who can go and step in. And, you know, we as central office are available to help out if needed. We have also hired more student teachers who right now during the pandemic are not finding employment. And so they're more willing to take on a teaching or substitute teaching role. And so we're trying to expedite that process and hire them quickly so that they can get in our classrooms and help out.
I think that's great. My concern, I guess, is that I'd heard that in a couple instances where a classroom teacher was not able to be there, we've taken the students that were in person in that classroom and moved them to other classrooms in the same cohort. And that seems to me to increase our exposures in some ways. I understand why it might be absolutely necessary, but it certainly doesn't seem ideal. And I'm hoping that that is not our standard response.
I know the safety director, Mr. Wozniak, and Dr. Baez are working on the tracing. And so ensuring that exposure does not happen and not moving students who we consider to be exposed to another classroom. So really just trying to put safety at the forefront and not moving students if we feel they're exposed, then they need to be quarantined.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Ready for the vote? All in favor, raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oppose 0. Pass 7-0. Resolution adopting one-time employee retention incentive payment for all district employees through 2020-2021 school year. This is our second incentive that we were issuing. Ms. Hanson?
I move that we approve this retention incentive payment in the amount of $500.
A second.
Ms. Hanson makes the motion that we approve this. Ms. Halsey seconds the motion. Any discussion or question? Ms. Halsey?
Thanks. I am fully supportive of this, but I just had a question in terms of the incentive that we approved last semester. I thought the board had had a discussion about making that qualification for that incentive as wide as possible, that a doctor's note would not be required if the employee felt that, you know, for whatever extenuating health reason, they couldn't continue past the semester, that they would not be obligated to repay that. So I was surprised to see that when the payments went out to staff, when I know that they were very grateful for them, that there was that obligation to provide a doctor's note if for some unforeseeable reason they felt, you know, that their health situation dictated their need to separate from the district before the end of the year. So I was wondering if administration could clarify that. And I'm also hoping that we don't put any restrictions of that nature onto this incentive.
Anyone else? Mr. McGrath?
I have a question about what the total cost for this will be.
We're in alignment with the first semester, and the budget amendment was just over $600,000 for a $500 one-time incentive.
Thank you.
Mr. McLaughlin, you had your hand up? You're muted. I can't hear you.
Oh, you're right. I am. I'm sorry. That's my fault, Clem, or Ms. Cantu, President Cantu. So I continue to not see any justification for a further bonus to staff. I think the district's done an excellent job of retaining employees, ensuring there was no pay disruption, doing its best to provide a safe environment for its workforce. And we gave a raise last year. Then we did $500 as a compromise in the fall, but I don't understand why this is coming back 2 months later for a second round. Nobody's lost any money among our staff. In fact, we have, from what I can see, transportation employees, we're inventing things for them to do in order for them to continue to get their hours and to continue to get their pay. And most of our employees have received not only the $500 in the fall, but the initial $1,200 from the U.S. Treasury, the subsequent $600 in November, and potentially $1,400 really soon. So it just doesn't comport with my understanding of any of our normal goals. It's not tied to student outcomes. In fact, the educational experience we're providing for children this year on account of COVID response is probably worse than it's ever been. We've got virtual classes. We've got thousands of children failing. We've got kids not attending that we haven't heard from. And so to then give a bonus, I just don't understand any rationale for that. I mean, the community's hurting. More than 12% of the community has lost its job and gotten no pay. Meanwhile, as Mr. Barton said, we sent all those tax bills out, and we're expecting everyone to pay that full amount on time or be penalized. And then we're using, as stewards of the taxpayer funds, we're then just giving them away $500 without any tie to performance, merit, or anything else. So I'm opposed to this. I think that it's a backdoor way to increase compensation because some of us felt what we provided in last spring was inadequate. But there again, it's a poor solution for that. We can simply provide a more substantive raise when we do employee compensation in March. That's what I would favor doing. So I'm opposed to this resolution.
Any other person? Any other trustee?
Ms. Cantu, I just wanted to answer Ms. Halsey's question. So the administration's take of what was voted on the motion was to include the verbiage about health concerns. And so that was why it was added to the documentation provided to all staff, that the incentive would not be recollected if it was related to a health-related concern.
Thank you. Ms. Munoz, it's just my recollection is that we specifically asked administration to be granting that as widely, to interpret that as widely as possible. And perhaps I misunderstood, perhaps I'm wrong, but that was my understanding coming out of that meeting, is that we really wanted, almost no strings attached to that. And that if an employee came and said to administration, my family's health situation dictates that I'm unable to continue, that would be sufficient. But I guess maybe my other fellow trustees remember it differently.
We ready to vote? Any other questions, comments?
Can I just clarify then that this motion does not carry that stipulation?
Yes. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5 opposed. 1. Did you vote, Ms. Villalpando? No? Ms. Villalpando, did you vote? I can't hear you. You're muted.
She did not vote. She's abstaining.
I didn't vote.
Okay, so it was.
I'm abstaining.
Okay, 5-4 for the motion, 1 against the motion, and 1 abstention. That's the vote. Last item, discussion and possible action regarding development of subcommittee to address central office. And so far I've had 1 trustee sign up for this.
You can put me down too.
Okay, Ms. Henson. Anyone else? So I guess we want a motion to establish a subcommittee to address central office issues. Anybody else want to serve on that? Ms. Mejia?
I do.
Okay. So that gives us 3.
I just want to say that I wish I could, but I'm really kind of busy at this time.
Yes, Ms. Viapando.
3 is a good number because you don't have to, it's a non-public meeting.
Yeah, we can't do more than 3. So we have the 3 people that want to serve on this committee. So we need a motion to establish a subcommittee.
Ms. Cantu, I'll make the motion.
Who's the third person?
Myra Mejia, Trustee Mejia.
And I know me, and who else?
And Miguel.
Okay.
Miguel Arredondo.
Ms. Cantu, I'll go ahead and make a motion that that the board approve the creation of a subcommittee of trustees to explore, possible central administration options, and that committee include trustees Hansen, Mejia, and Arredondo.
I second.
Ms. Halsey, second. Any discussions or questions? All in favor?
Well, before we vote, I just wanted to clarify for, everyone watching at home, or, at least what like my expectation or intention is obviously any work that is done by this committee would be, readily available to colleagues on the school board, and any possible recommendations or solutions or ideas would obviously have to come back to the board in its entirety before anything happens. So, anyway.
All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Are you voting, Mr. McLaughlin?
I am abstaining from this item, President Cantu.
Thank you. So 6, 0 against, and 1 abstention.
I move that we adjourn.
I'll second.
Ms. Hansen moves and Mr. McLaughlin seconds that we adjourn this meeting. All in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Opposed, 0. Thank you all very much.